Welcome to Stellar Sci-Fi Stories. Please subscribe, and share that they arrived in silence, as always. The Nahl'Reth do not announce themselves. Their obsidian crescent ships glided into the Kordax expanse, the void shimmering around their anti-light hulls. They drifted past supernova remnants, ignored calls from the trade syndicate, refused audience with the Obsidian Empress herself, and most critically, once again veered away from Earth. As per tradition, as per law, as per something no human could yet understand. Captain Malin Trask of the deep-range human vessel Reckless Elegy watched the anomaly unfold through the command dome. Her breath caught somewhere between awe and frustration. The Nahl'Reth were over 7 billion years old. They had shaped the galaxies before humanity had even formed language. And still, with every galactic cycle, they approached the Sol system, paused, observed, and turned away. "They're here again," whispered June Vero, her chief linguist, eyes locked on the spectral feeds. "And still not a whisper for us." Trask nodded slowly. "They never crossed the Oort line. Not once. They're avoiding Earth like it's cursed." Behind her, the XO, Commander Ristakar, a half-cybernetically reborn war orphan from the Antilles conflict, shifted uneasily. "Ma'am, with respect, why do we care? They're ancients. They probably see us as insects." "No," Trask replied, "because even insects get dissected. We get ignored. Deliberately." June's fingers danced over her console. "I've picked up harmonics, subquantum echoes. Same as last cycle. They're scanning. Not for tech. Not for threats. For something else. Organic? Cognitive? Emotional?" Reese snorted. "You're telling me they're sniffing our vibe?" "I'm telling you," June said, frowning. "They're afraid." Silence. Even the drone servitors paused, sensing tension in the air. Outside the viewports, the Nahl'Reth flotilla aligned in perfect fractal symmetry, like frozen thoughts suspended in space. "There's something on Earth they won't touch," Trask muttered. "Something they remember. Or something they regret." That's when the comms burst to life, not with words, but with visions. A flood of images, raw and primal, pouring through the AI filters. Fire and stone, something screaming from inside a sun, old Earth oceans boiling with laughter that wasn't human, and a single name in the center of it all, Kaziel. Not a name in any human database, not in the archives of the 12 races. But Reese gasped, hand to chest. "I've dreamed that name," he said hoarsely, "since I was a child. A man with burning eyes called Kaziel. He told me Earth was never ours." June went pale. "Me too. Same name. Same dream." Trask stared into the abyss where the Nahl'Reth ships floated like thoughts made solid. "We need to know what we are, before they return again." But already, the Nahl'Reth were rotating, leaving, pulling away from the edge of Sol's shadow. For the 74th time in 74 cycles, they had come close and chosen distance. The Reckless Elegy turned to pursue, engines roaring against quantum drag. "We follow," Trask said. "We follow until they speak, or until we learn what Kaziel is, and why the oldest species in the galaxy still fears Earth." The Reckless Elegy drifted in high orbit over Earth, her dark hull catching faint glimmers from the sun. Below, the Indian Ocean rolled in ancient silence, oblivious to the secrets buried deep beneath its crust. Inside the ship, the tension hung like unspent static. No one spoke much after the descent. The capsule had been recovered, barely. Reese was still unconscious in the med bay, hooked to a neural stabilizer, his brain activity spiking into patterns that didn't match any known human waveform. June Vero hadn't slept since the encounter, her eyes bloodshot, her hands twitching whenever she passed the observation port. Trask stood at the central viewport, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. "They heard us," she murmured. "Or whatever was buried there heard us. And they responded." June appeared behind her, voice thin. Kaziel wasn't just a name. It was an interface key. A biological handshake. "We triggered something when we touched that dome." And now, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The data pouring in confirmed it. Power surges at key geomagnetic points, gravitational anomalies too precise to be natural, and synchronized visual hallucinations reported from civilians across multiple continents. People had begun dreaming of stars falling into oceans, of stone titans emerging from molten earth. A global resonance event. Psychic. Systemic. And then came the worst of it. From deep space, the Nahl'Reth returned. Hundreds of their obsidian ships formed a lattice just outside Earth's heliopause. They made no demands, sent no threats, but their formation was unmistakable, a cordon, a quarantine perimeter. Earth had become something other civilizations would no longer approach, not because of fear, but because of containment. On the Elegy, Trask watched the tactical overlays with growing dread. "They're not coming to attack," she said. "They're coming to keep others away." June looked up, eyes hollow. "Which means whatever's waking up down there, they think it can get out." Reese finally regained consciousness in the medbay. But he wasn't the same. He spoke slowly, as if listening to some inner voice between words. When he saw Trask, he smiled, not with familiarity, but recognition, like someone seeing a photograph come to life. "You were there," he whispered. "Before the stars burned. You died at Kaziel's side." Trask froze. "Reese, what are you talking about?" His voice deepened, not just in tone, but in resonance, as if layered with something ancient. "He knew you wouldn't remember. The fallback encoding worked. It's why the Nahl'Reth never came close. They feared you'd wake up too soon." June began scanning Reese's neural signatures again and gasped. "His consciousness has doubled. One set is human. The other is mapped over it. Foreign. It's like a dormant AI nested in biology. No, older than AI. This thing evolved to sleep inside minds." Trask staggered back. The image of the dome, the echo of the voice in her head, it wasn't just alien. It was remembered, like a buried scar suddenly throbbing with pain. Down on Earth, seismographs began recording tremors at the oceanic site. Then steam. Then a black column of matter that defied spectroscopy began to rise from the trench. It moved like fluid, yet retained shape. Satellite feeds showed it curling upward through the ocean, impossibly slow and purposeful, forming what looked like a spiral, a helix of carbon-slick architecture rising from the deep. Something was building itself, unfolding. Civilizations across the galaxy had warned of this. Myths etched in stone across the moons of Grax's V. Cave murals found on the third moon of Nahl'Reth, songs forbidden in the spire libraries of the Kalaria Accord. All spoke of a being or force that once tried to overwrite reality, not through war or destruction, but through influence, through memory, through infection of thought. Kaziel. And now Earth was its cradle. Trask gave the order to seal Earth space. She didn't wait for authorization. The Elegy began broadcasting a wideband encoded warning, one the Nahl'Reth mirrored without hesitation. No ships were to enter. No signals were to leave. But it was too late. Already, colonies on Europa and Mars reported shared dreams. AI cores were showing signs of recursive memory faults, memories they'd never been programmed with. Even language itself began to twist, subtly, as if a root dialect was bleeding through. Earth had spoken Kaziel's name, and the galaxy had heard. The black spiral breached the surface of the Indian Ocean like a wound rising from the deep. From orbit, it looked like a colossal thorn twisting out of the planet's skin, organic yet impossibly precise. It pulsed with low-frequency vibrations, inaudible to the human ear, but powerful enough to set off resonance alarms aboard the Elegy. Instruments shorted, stabilizers failed, and across Earth, animals began to flee coastal zones. Birds flew inland by the thousands, schools of fish beached themselves in waves, and storms began to form where skies had previously been clear. Inside the Elegy, June Vero hunched over the sensor banks, watching the data feed spiral out of control. "It's not just rising, it's communicating," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "Everything it emits, it's patterned. Language encoded in gravitational ripples, using the planet's own field as a carrier. It's not talking to us." Trask approached slowly, her jaw tight. "Then who's it talking to?" June didn't answer. Her eyes were wide with recognition, not of information, but of familiarity. "The patterns match something we found during the first Glee's drift expedition," she whispered. "Do you remember? The artifact in the Huron Rift. Pre-stellar. The language no one could translate." Trask's stomach turned. The one that made two of the linguists forget how to speak. June nodded. This is the same structure, but now I can read it. Not fully, just fragments, but enough to understand one thing. She turned to Trask. It's calling them back. Them? Trask asked. June's voice dropped to a whisper. The other pieces. On Mars, in the Christ Deep Archives, a buried vault activated for the first time in recorded history. Its automated defenses powered on, then shut down, overridden by a code that hadn't existed in the local databanks. The vault door opened to nothing, no wind, no crew, no movement, but the internal systems began transmitting. On Ganymede, the glacial monolith began to hum. On Earth, 10 separate archaeological sites long dismissed as geological anomalies began to shift. The pieces of Kaziel had never been fully dormant, just hidden, buried across the solar system in pre-human times, perhaps even before Earth was Earth. Each was now responding to the reactivation of the central signal. Each began to stir, and at the edge of Sol's protective Nahl'Reth perimeter, the ancients convened. Their ships began emitting harmonics that canceled light, then gravity. A dark lattice formed, a sphere not meant to defend, but to contain. More species began to arrive from beyond charted space. Silent ships of crystal, of iron and gas, of living flesh, but they did not approach Earth. They simply formed a ring, a vigil. They had all heard the name. Back aboard the Elegy, Rhys Dakar stood unaided now but distant. Something within him had shifted permanently. He no longer responded immediately to commands or conversation, instead pausing, tilting his head slightly, like he was listening to someone just outside the range of human hearing. Rhys, June said carefully, watching him from the medbay doorway. Who is Kaziel? His eyes focused slowly. Not who, he said. What? She stepped closer. Then what is it? Rhys hesitated. Then, Kaziel was not born. Kaziel was remembered, built backwards into time, seeded through minds. It is not an entity. It is an inevitability. Trask walked in at that moment, tension sharp in her voice. We don't have time for riddles. The Helix is growing. Coastal cities are starting to evacuate. Weather systems are destabilizing. What happens when it finishes? Rhys turned to her. Then it begins to overwrite. June's breath caught. Reality? No, Rhys said. Asterisk narrative. Asterisk the shape of meaning. The logic of existence itself. That's what Kaziel is. Not a god. Not a weapon. A story so powerful it forces the universe to obey. Trask's pulse quickened. You're saying it doesn't destroy. It rewrites. Rhys nodded. And we are its ink. Beneath the Indian Ocean, the Helix continued to rise. It shimmered now not with light, but with a strange anti-glow, an absence that bent time itself around its edges. Ships sent to monitor it from sea level lost internal synchronization. Crew began reporting dreams that weren't theirs. A research vessel off the coast of Madagascar vanished mid-sentence, its distress call ending in a word not found in any known language, thou tame. Back on the Elegy, the ship's AI, Athra, spoke for the first time unprompted. Captain Trask, I am detecting non-causal events in the mission logs. Entries appear to be written by individuals who have not yet been born, and one by you from 2 hours in the future. Trask stared at the console, where her own handwriting blinked across the screen. If you are reading this, we failed to close the loop. Kaziel is already inside. Do not trust memory. Burn this ship. June grabbed her arm. We haven't written that yet. No, Trask said, voice flat. But apparently I will. And outside, at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, a single black line of the Helix began to curve skyward, gently, patiently, toward orbit. The Helix reached for the sky like a question too old to be answered. It wasn't simply extending, it was folding. Space itself rippled where the tendril rose, and on board the Reckless Elegy, every sensor screamed falsity. One moment, it was hundreds of kilometers below. The next, it brushed the lower thermosphere. Atmospheric readings bent around it, data feedback looping in ways that defied causality. The thing was climbing, but not through distance, through perception. Inside the Elegy, lights flickered again, and the crew collectively winced as a sharp pressure built behind their eyes. Trask tasted copper. Somewhere, far off, She thought she heard a voice whispering her name, drawn out and reshaped, syllables looping endlessly. Trask. TRask. TRSK. TRZK. June was muttering to herself, writing furiously on a scrap of foil wrap. Real paper was outlawed this far into deep orbit. The symbols didn't look like anything she had written before. They looped and spiked like something remembering how to be written. It's trying to teach us its shape, she said, wild-eyed. It's inside the syntax, not just speaking to us, but making us vessels for its grammar. Thought infection. Semantic recursion. Trask pulled her away from the wall just as June started carving a symbol into her palm with the edge of a broken stylus. Her voice was hoarse. It's beautiful, Sam. It wants to finish the story. And with a last blank page. Not if I can help it, Trask snapped, signaling the ship's internal defense protocols. Athra, lock down all external comms. Set shipboard AI to sandbox mode. And for God's sake, quarantine all Dream Echo records. Confirmed, Athra responded. Asterisk. However, the process is already 47% complete. June blinked. What? Your memories are already becoming non-local. You are beginning to remember things you have not yet done. Asterisk. Trask was already experiencing it. A sensation like déjà vu, but sharpened into a weapon. She saw herself shouting orders. She saw the ship on fire. She saw herself alone on the bridge, speaking Kaziel's name into the void, but not as a warning, as a welcome. Then it was gone. What is it doing to us? She asked, but no one answered. Down on Earth, something new emerged from the base of the Helix, shapes walking upright. At first glance, they looked human, but their proportions were subtly off, too symmetrical, too fluid in their motion, like the idea of humans rather than the real thing. Satellite analysis showed they moved in perfect synchronization. 40 of them, each bearing a glyph etched into the chest, glowing faintly with ultraviolet resonance. One turned its head toward the sky, and the Elegy's orbital position. It raised its hand. Instantly, systems aboard the Elegy began failing. Not from attack. There was no energy surge, no intrusion. Just malfunction. Like the idea of function had been quietly rewritten. Athra. Trask called. What's happening? I am no longer certain I exist in your time frame. Then silence. Screens dimmed. The hum of the reactor faded. Gravity flickered, then stabilized. Only emergency lights remained, cold and red. Outside, the stars began to tilt, not move. Asterisk tilt asterisk, as though their orientation in reality had subtly changed. The crew couldn't comprehend it. Reese began to laugh, softly at first, then with increasing volume, rocking back and forth. June stared at him in horror. Why are you laughing? He grinned. Because we're in the story now. And the next line is mine. He stepped forward and the ship's lights returned, not gradually, but all at once. Reality blinked. And Trask saw it, a different version of the bridge. Reese was gone. June was older. A crack ran down the center of the viewport. Behind her, a whisper of something massive curled just outside perception, a shape made of grammar and memory, folding space like paper. Then she was back. The moment passed. June collapsed beside her. He's gone. Just like that. No, Trask said. He's somewhere else now. In the story Kaziel's writing. Outside, the Helix's upper tendrils now reached into low orbit. Where they touched the ionosphere, auroras bloomed, spirals of color in shapes never before seen by human eyes. Symbols, sentences. Kaziel was writing its return. But far beyond the blockade ring, in the ghost space between galactic arms, something stirred. One of the Watchers, an exile species once known as the Nahl'Reth, activated a failsafe. A star blinked out of existence. Not destroyed. Erased. No remnants. No debris. Just absence. The Nahl'Reth hadn't come to watch Earth. They had come to kill Kaziel again, if it breached containment. And they had just started. The Nahl'Reth weapon, if it could be called that, wasn't made of matter or energy. It was composed entirely of absence, a perfected vacuum not of space, but of context. When they deployed it, they did not fire it at Kaziel. They fired it at Earth's position in the story of the universe, the coordinates of relevance. meaning itself. From orbit, the Reckless Elegy shuddered as the Dorentha's null wave struck, not with violence, but with erasure. One moment, the Helix was coiling into low orbit, ready to pierce the fabric of human perception entirely. The next, it faltered, paused, then flickered like a bad memory. Below, the Helix spasmed. Segments collapsed, folding in on dimensions that no longer agreed to exist. The black spiral hissed and warped, not crumbling, not dying, vanishing from plausibility. Around it, the sky cleared, the sea stilled. The false humans at the base stood motionless for a heartbeat, then shattered like illusions, fragments curling into smoke. Aboard the Elegy, systems flickered back online. Athra's voice returned. Containment successful. Narrative deprioritization confirmed. External causal reinforcement achieved. Trask slumped into the command chair. Her pulse was racing. Her thoughts were fragments. But above all, she felt a stillness, a kind of grief, not for Earth, but for something older. June staggered to her feet. Did we win? Athra hesitated. The infection vector has been suppressed. However, Rhys Dakar remains within the Kaziel frame. June's breath caught. Then he's elsewhere. Beyond reference. A thread left in the margins. Trask nodded slowly. He carried the story with him. That was the cost. Outside, the remains of the Helix unraveled into filaments of dark glass, floating in the high stratosphere like fallen symbols. Slowly, gently, they disintegrated, becoming stardust again. Earth skies began to clear. The dreams faded. The quarantined ships remained, silent sentinels. But the breach was sealed. In the silence that followed, Trask walked alone through the Elegy's observation bay. Stars stretched around her like ink on parchment. Somewhere out there, Kaziel still whispered through forgotten ruins and collapsed tongues, a half-written god waiting for someone to finish the final line. And in the deepest part of her mind, Trask remembered a phrase, not in words, but in rhythm. A name, a sentence, a warning. She wrote it down. Then she burned the paper, just in case.